In 2007, a tragic massacre occurred in Mong Cheng County, Anhui Province, resulting in 5 deaths and 1 person severely injured. However, what truly shocked the public was the motive behind the crime. It was so incomprehensible and unexpected that no one could have foreseen it. Marriage, which is often regarded as the foundation of happiness, became the fuse that ignited the tragedy in this sorrowful story. What exactly happened on that day? What drove the perpetrator to such madness, causing them to lose control and commit such a brutal crime? Let us dive into the details and uncover the full story in today's account. The dawn's piercing scream. At 5:30 a.m. on July 10th, 2007, the sky over Anhui was shrouded in layers of gray clouds. A light breeze swept through, carrying the dampness of morning mist. The first light of dawn began to break, illuminating the village road in Hojing, a small hamlet in Yuefang town. With just over 100 residents, the village was always lively in the early mornings. Farmers would rise quickly, preparing for a long day in the fields. Everything seemed as usual, until a scream tore through the stillness. "Oh my God, someone's dead." Zhang, a villager, was awakened by the frantic quacking of his ducks outside. He hurriedly got out of bed and rushed toward the duck pen to check. All the ducks were safe, but what stopped him cold was a blood-stained bedsheet lying in the corner of his yard. His eyes drifted toward the opposite hill, where the house of his neighbor, Zheng Wani, stood on the slope. A dreadful feeling crept over him. Without hesitation, Zhang followed the path up the hill toward Zheng's house. When he arrived, he found the gate locked from the outside with a chain. He called out, but no one answered. His mind flashed back to the previous night when he had heard loud noises from the house, but he dismissed it as an ordinary quarrel at the time. Without further delay, Zhang picked up a nearby iron rod, pried the chain loose, and rushed inside. The scene that greeted him was horrifying. A woman lay sprawled on the floor, her body soaked in blood. Zhang was paralyzed with shock, his hands trembling. He shouted for help, but the silence around him was deafening. After regaining some composure, Zhang pulled out his phone and called the police. As soon as the report was received, the police swiftly arrived at the scene. By then, a crowd of villagers had already gathered outside the house, murmuring in disbelief and fear. The police searched the house thoroughly and discovered 5 bodies on the ground floor. On the second floor, they found a woman still clinging to life. She was immediately rushed to the hospital for emergency care. The identities of the victims were soon confirmed. Zheng Wani, 63 years old, the homeowner. Zheng Wei, 23 years old, his daughter. Zheng Jiangqi, 87 years old, Wani's father. Zheng Yunlan, 59 years old, Wani's younger sister. Zheng Xiaowu, 8 years old, his granddaughter. The only survivor was Han Yin, the cousin of Zheng Wei. The first clues. This massacre was unprecedented, not only in Mong Cheng County, but in the entire Anhui Province. Authorities immediately instructed the police force in Boizhou City to intensify efforts and capture the perpetrator as quickly as possible. In a single night, 5 lives were extinguished without a sound, without a cry for help. Even the closest neighbors had heard nothing unusual. News of the brutal killings spread rapidly, casting a shadow of fear over the entire village. The grisly images of bloodied bodies haunted the minds of the villagers, tormenting them whenever they closed their eyes. Who could the killer be? What deep grudge did they harbor to commit such a horrific crime against this family? Upon investigation, the police ruled out robbery as the motive. Nothing of value had been taken from the home. If not money, then what drove the perpetrator to kill? The police immediately began investigating the Zheng family's social connections. They learned that the Zhengs were well known in the village for their wealth and harmonious relationships with their neighbors. The family, spanning multiple generations, had a reputation for maintaining traditional values and respecting family hierarchy. Given this background, it seemed unlikely that the crime stemmed from personal grudges outside the family. Moreover, the Zhang household was heavily guarded and populated with family members, making it nearly impossible for an outsider to enter unnoticed. This led the police to suspect that the perpetrator must have been someone familiar with the family, someone who could move freely through the house, knowing every corner and passageway. The mysterious disappearance of the son-in-law. During the investigation, one name drew the police's special attention: Huang Zhongwen, the son-in-law of Zheng Wani and husband of Zheng Wei. What raised suspicions was his sudden disappearance following the massacre. Nobody had seen or heard from him since. Some rumors suggested that he had gone away for business, while others whispered that he was the perpetrator and had fled after committing the crime. The police confirmed that on July 8th, Zhongwen had traveled to his father-in-law's house in Mong Cheng to pick up his wife and bring her to their new apartment in Yins County. He stayed for a day, but when the murders took place, he vanished. Witnesses reported that early in the morning on July 10th, they saw a man walking a dog away from Zheng's house, locking the gate carefully before leaving in haste. Based on the witness descriptions, the police suspected that this man was likely Huang Zhongwen. However, despite their suspicions, the police had no concrete evidence to accuse him. The investigation stalled until the hospital reported that Han Yin, the sole survivor, had regained consciousness. The survivor's testimony. Han Yin couldn't speak due to the injuries to her neck, but she used a pen to write down the entire account of what had happened. In her statement, she confirmed the perpetrator was Huang Zhongwen, the son-in-law of Zheng Wani. According to Han Yin, in the early morning of July 10th, she had been sleeping on the second floor when she was suddenly awakened by sharp, excruciating pain. In the dim light, she saw the gleam of a knife in the attacker's hand. Sensing her life was in grave danger, Han Yin pretended to be dead to survive. Believing she was lifeless, the perpetrator even lifted her legs to let the blood drain faster before leaving the room. In that moment, Han Yin recognized the attacker's familiar figure. It was Huang Zhongwen. Though gravely injured from multiple stab wounds, Han Yin managed to drag herself downstairs. To her horror, she found all 5 of her family members brutally slaughtered. The air was thick with the metallic stench of blood, making her dizzy and nauseous. Desperate to escape, she rushed to the front door, only to find it locked from the outside. In despair, she returned to the second floor, where she threw blood-stained sheets and pillows out of the window to signal for help. She also found a pen and wrote the words, "Help me," on a scrap of paper, which she tossed into the neighbor's yard before losing consciousness again. When she woke up, she was lying in a hospital bed. Han Yin's insight into the son-in-law. Han Yin described Huang Zhongwen as a seemingly mild-mannered man with a pale complexion and a slightly plump build. However, he often pressured his wife, Zheng Wei, to move back with him to their apartment in Yins County, but she consistently refused. On the evening of July 9th, during a family dinner, Han Yin warned Huang Zhongwen to control his behavior, as he had been drinking. Instead of responding, Zhongwen silently stood up and left the table. That night, he sat alone at the foot of the stairs, drinking in solitude, burdened by heavy thoughts. When Zheng Wei noticed him, she harshly scolded her husband in front of everyone. Han Yin speculated that Zhongwen, consumed by frustration and resentment from his troubled marriage, may have lost control, leading him to commit the brutal massacre. On the afternoon of July 10th, the manhunt for Huang Zhongwen made a crucial breakthrough. Police located him waiting at a bus stop near the Sisi Highway. When they arrested him, Zhongwen remained calm and confessed to the crimes in detail. He openly recounted the long simmering conflicts with his wife, Zheng Wei, and the emotional despair that had pushed him toward this violent act. From romance to ruin. At the time, Huang Zhongwen, 31 years old, had only completed middle school and owned a tile shop in Sisi County, Shuangqing City, Anhui Province. His love story with Zheng Wei began during the 2005 Lunar New Year, when they were introduced by relatives. At that time, Zheng Wen was working as a painter in Zhejiang Province, while Zheng Wei was employed at a food company in Shanghai. Despite the physical distance, their love blossomed. Every day, Zheng Wen sent dozens of messages to Wei, and whenever possible, they spent hours talking on the phone. He regularly topped up her phone balance, sent gifts, and transferred money to her account so she could shop. Their long-distance relationship lasted over a year, during which Zheng Wen's parents began urging them to marry. Wei agreed on the condition that Zheng Wen give up his painting job and start his own business. Zheng Wen complied, and with his brother-in-law, he opened a tile shop in Sisi County to prepare for their new life together. In late 2006, Wei returned to Shanghai to finalize their wedding plans. The couple agreed that Zheng Wen's family would pay a 30,000 renminbi dowry to the Zheng family, along with an additional 6,000 renminbi for Wei to buy clothes and decorations for the wedding. The wedding, the first signs of trouble. The wedding was held on February 16, 2007, at the Zheng family's home. However, cracks in their relationship appeared on the very first night. Zheng Wen had eagerly anticipated a joyful wedding night, but Wei rejected his advances, citing his excessive drinking. She promised him that they could be intimate in a few days, once they moved to Sisi. However, the situation worsened. On February 18th, after they returned to Sisi County, Wei refused to be physically close to her husband. She stayed fully clothed in bed and avoided all attempts at affection. No matter how Zheng Wen coaxed her, she continued to reject him with various excuses. By February 22nd, following a second wedding celebration, tensions reached a boiling point. Wei became upset, dissatisfied with the bouquet and the wedding decorations, leading to yet another argument. That night, Zheng Wei once again wrapped herself tightly in a blanket and went to sleep early, leaving Huang Zhongwen to sit alone, smoking through the night. His hopes, built over years of love, felt as if they had been dashed by a bucket of cold water. In the following days, Wei continued to avoid him, pushing Zhongwen into a state of despair and confusion. He could not understand why the woman he had loved so dearly for 2 years had grown so distant and cold after their wedding. Zhongwen began to sink deeper into negative emotions. Even his mother, despite her efforts, could not mediate the growing rift between the couple. What had started as a passionate romance had quickly deteriorated into a string of conflicts, disappointments, and emotional torment. After the wedding, the couple moved into a rental house in Sisi County. Wei found work as a hotel attendant, while Zhongwen managed their tile shop. Despite his unwavering dedication to her, Wei's attitude only softened slightly. However, she continued to reject all attempts at intimacy. Whenever Zhongwen made advances, she would abruptly turn cold. To avoid him, Wei began spending her free time in internet cafes or visiting her cousin's house after work. The situation reached a boiling point in early May 2007, when Wei stayed away from home for 3 consecutive days. In a frenzy of anger and worry, Zhongwen scoured the neighborhood, searching for his wife. Eventually, he found her at her cousin's house and dragged her home in a fit of rage. Provoked by her indifferent attitude, he slapped her twice, knocking her to the ground. 2 days later, Wei quit her job, took a bus, and returned to her parents' home in Mong Cheng. Despite Zhongwen's repeated phone calls and apologies, she remained cold and declared that she wanted a separation, refusing to return to Sisi County. From hope to despair. Zhongwen began to spiral into despair. He dwelled on the 36,000 renminbi dowry and the 80,000 to 90,000 RMB he had spent throughout their relationship. To make matters worse, his family had accumulated a 28,000 renminbi debt from the wedding. The fear of losing his wife, wasting all his money, and becoming the subject of ridicule in his village began to consume him. It was then that the thought of murder took root. If she refused to return to him, he would kill her. On May 3, 2007, Zhongwen wrote in his journal that since the day he married Wei, he had not experienced a single moment of happiness. His wife's coldness gnawed at him, and the thought of revenge haunted his mind. On May 20th, after receiving a phone call from Wei in which she officially ended their marriage, Zhongwen added another entry to his journal. "I want to kill Wei and her entire family." Carrying a fruit knife, Zhongwen traveled to Mong Cheng, prepared to carry out his deadly plan. However, when he arrived, Wei's family promised him that after the harvest, they would convince her to return to him. This temporarily soothed his rage, and after 2 days in Mong Cheng, Zhongwen returned to Sexless County, but Wei never came back. It was only later that Zhongwen discovered she had moved to Shanghai to take up a new job. On July 7, 2007, Huang Zhongwen received a phone call from Zhang Wei, asking him to come to Mong Cheng the following day. Although busy with work, Zhongwen agreed, yet in his heart, he felt uneasy. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Tomorrow, I will go to Mong Cheng. If Wei doesn't come back with me, I will kill her entire family." On the evening of July 8th, Zhongwen arrived in Mong Cheng, only to find that Wei had neither come to greet him nor was her phone reachable. Feeling frustrated, he bought 2 cigarettes and a bag of fruit before taking a ride to his father-in-law's house. The Zhang family welcomed him with a meal and wine. During the dinner, Zhongwen expressed his wish for Zhang Wani, his father-in-law, to convince Wei to return with him. Wani, however, brought up the incident where Zhongwen had hit Wei, leading to her treatment in Shanghai, which had cost the family 10,000 renminbi. Wani coldly told him that if he paid 20,000 renminbi, he would persuade Wei to come back. Zhongwen explained that he didn't have that amount of money with him, but his father-in-law brushed off his plea with indifference. That night, Zhongwen lay awake in the stifling heat of the guest room, his mind ablaze with rage and a sense of betrayal. Late in the morning of July 9th, Zhang Wei finally returned home, walking hand in hand with her cousin and playfully leading a dog. They were laughing, oblivious to Zhongwen's presence. During lunch, the entire family ate together and enjoyed lighthearted conversation. At the table, Wei told Zhongwen that if he wanted her to return to Sisi with him, he would have to give her 20,000 renminbi. Believing she was joking after a few drinks, Zhongwen didn't take her words seriously. Around 2 p.m., Wei and her cousin left the house, saying they were going to get her phone repaired. When Zhongwen offered to accompany them, Wei curtly refused. Left alone, Zhongwen spent the afternoon in a daze. He tried watching TV and playing games, but the anger and frustration gnawed at him. Thoughts of betrayal and loss tormented him relentlessly, leaving him seething. The final night before the tragedy. That evening, the family gathered again for dinner. Zhongwen drank beer while Wei had wine. After a few family members went to bed, Zhongwen stood before his wife, desperately trying to have a conversation. "Zhang Wei, can we talk for a moment? There's nothing left to say between us." Wei replied coldly, trying to control his growing fury. Zhongwen shouted, "You called me here. How can you say there's nothing to talk about?" He pleaded with her to forget the past and start over, hoping she would return to live with him. But his desperate plea was cut short by Zhang Wani, Wei's father. "You hit my daughter so badly that we had to spend 10,000 renminbi on her treatment in Shanghai. If you want her back, you'll need to pay 20,000 renminbi." Zhongwen promised to pay the 20,000 renminbi his father-in-law demanded. But not immediately. He didn't have enough money with him at the time. The tense conversation dragged on until 11 p.m., with no resolution in sight. Finally, Zheng Wei stood up, went upstairs, and left her husband behind in despair, clinging to the last shred of hope. Zhong Wan followed Wei to the balcony on the second floor, begging her one last time, "We don't have to argue about who's right or wrong. Just come back with me, and I'll change." Wei shook her head, her voice cold and resolute. A broken cup can't be put back together. Every plea was met with rejection. Not only did Wei refuse to reconcile, but she mocked and humiliated Zhongwen, pushing him further into a rage. Desperate, Zhongwen called his cousin, hoping he could help convince Wei. However, before he could speak, Wei snatched the phone and continued taunting him. Thoughts of money, love, and betrayal swirled in Zhongwen's mind. He felt that not just Wei, but her entire family had betrayed and wronged him. He believed that if he did nothing, he would lose everything: his marriage, his dignity, and his standing in society. Unable to sleep in the stifling heat, Zhongwen lay awake, seething. Wei's cruel words replayed in his mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The decision to kill had already taken root within him in the weeks prior, and now his rage turned that dark thought into a grim resolve. In the dead of night, while the family lay in a drunken slumber, Zhongwen quietly slipped downstairs. He retrieved a knife from the kitchen and, one by one, murdered his wife's family in cold blood. Once his deadly rampage was complete, he locked the house from the outside and fled into the night. The final moments of a desperate man. Zhongwen later told the police that after committing the murders, he planned to return to Sisi County, say goodbye to his parents, and take his own life. But before he could act on this plan, the authorities caught him. During his interrogation, Zhongwen sat on a small chair, his hands tightly cuffed. His face was pale, and his expression vacant, at times offering faint, hollow smiles, and at other moments, sighing heavily with exhaustion. Throughout his confession, he did not express hatred toward Wei. Instead, he seemed overwhelmed by fatigue and regret. In November 2007, after several rounds of trials, Huang Zhongwen was sentenced to death for premeditated murder. He did not appeal the verdict and accepted his fate, stating that he wished to atone for his crimes with his life. In his final interaction with the media, Huang Zhongwen denied rumors that Zheng Wei's family had married her off just to claim the dowry for building a house. He firmly stated, "We were in a free relationship for over 2 years. There was no scheme to deceive me for money. Wei was kind to my parents, just not to me. But I couldn't accept her refusal to fulfill the duties of a wife." When the police asked, "Was there no other way to resolve this besides murder?" Zhongwen bowed his head and sighed deeply. "I didn't know what else to do. I thought killing them was the only way." Zhongwen revealed that to arrange the wedding, his family had drained their life savings and even gone into debt, accumulating nearly 100,000 renminbi in total. He remembered his father, now in his 60s, who painstakingly carried bundles of bamboo down the mountains every day, scraping together every yuan to see his son married. When it became clear that Wei had no intention of returning, Zhongwen felt as though his entire world had crumbled. The questions consumed him. If she doesn't come back, I'll lose everything. I'll lose the woman I love and my dignity in front of my family and friends. What will be left of my life? I'll be nothing but a laughingstock. Driven by despair, he believed that the only way to escape the overwhelming pain was to kill Wei. He saw no other way out. After months of incarceration and multiple court proceedings, Huang Zhongwen was executed by firing squad on May 13, 2008. The day of his execution marked the official closure of the case. The lesson behind the crime. Though Huang Zhongwen committed a grave crime, many still felt a sense of sympathy for him. They understood that he had once believed that marriage would provide him with a loving home and a complete life. But, tragically, he never truly experienced a single day of being a husband, let alone the joy and honor of fatherhood. The coldness of his wife, combined with the harsh expectations from the Zheng family, contributed to the emotional turmoil that ultimately pushed him down a dark path. However, no one deserved to meet such a horrific end. And this, too, is no excuse to justify the brutal actions of a murderer. We must not condone such atrocities. Yet it is also essential to examine the story from multiple perspectives. The Huang Zhongwen case leaves us with many thought-provoking questions. Did true love ever exist in this marriage? What becomes of love when intimacy is absent? Regardless of the answers, one thing is clear: we should approach life with a positive mindset. If life takes an unexpected turn, especially in matters of the heart, as it did for Huang Zhongwen, we must learn to let go. Only by letting go can we find freedom and peace within ourselves. What are your thoughts on today's case? Leave a comment below and let us know. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Decoder Box so you won't miss any of the world's most fascinating crime stories. Goodbye for now, and we'll see you in the next video.